I mean, you can basically see the basic setup right now. This will be the sled once I get the angle set correctly. The base, the back, and the first set of legs is all one piece. And then this sled system, the rails for the sled, which aren't done yet, but the basic frame is cut out right now. That's a second piece. And what I do is right now, just to get the angle right, I haven't cut any shape or anything. I've just got the corner sitting right here on the top of this square tubing. We got a split there in the bottom, so that I have to pry it open just a little bit and it springs back shut and grabs the spine. That way, when I adjust it to the angle that I want, it'll kind of grab by itself and keep itself in place as then I start to weld and tack things in place and get it where it needs to be. So what I'm doing here is, it's just a very simple box design, just square tubing set into a 90-degree square. It's the same width as the actual track on the leg press, but just a hair bit longer. I'm using this ruler not only make sure that each side is perfectly straight, but then to go along there to make sure that they're lined up with each other on each side, and then all four are also squared off to one another. I've taken the actual wheels off of the frames so that I don't have to worry about the heat from the welding burning up the grease inside the wheels. Now you saw the basic bulk of the frame, the square tubing here, square tubing back here, all the basic frame stuff you already saw. Now what I didn't do a close-up of is during the weekend I actually added my angle iron here, which I was talking about, so that it could support these wheels right here. And of course I built the basic sled and I tested it out and it worked fine. Now what I've done since then is I went ahead and I added this actual leg press plate, and it was pretty simple. I just did a square box at first, and my idea was I decided to change my mind. Instead of using a hinge, I want everything to be as sturdy as possible, even if it's not as fast. I realized that I never have to quickly swap between leg press and hack squat. I'm choosing one or the other typically. So I really don't need a hinge. It's more important to me that something is just as sturdy as possible. So what I did was I scrapped the hinge idea, I built this basic frame, and I decided that I knew that the frame here would drop down on top of the sled right here. And since I'm using the same square tubing for both, the size from the top tube to the bottom tube that are touching each other is the same width, the same size, same dimensions. So I am able to take this plate, which I recycled, which is why it's got some surface oxidation. It's old plate that I've had for a while. I'll clean it up. But this plate right here, I decided to then overhang. So it can overhang below the actual pressing area and actually cover the front of the sled here, which kind of gives me more depth to go down with my feet if I want. The secondary thing that it does is because it covers the plate from the sled right here, it means that if I push, the plate hits the sled and it can't go any further back. To capture it so it can't fall forward towards me, I added this 1/4-inch plate on the back. So it basically acts like a little C shape, like a little mouth, and it drops down and it grabs the plate. Now that alone is a tight enough fit and it's snug enough that you could actually press and it won't really wobble. It shifts a little bit as materials do because tolerances are not exact, but you could basically press it. However, to add more rigidity, especially with more weight on the thing, I decided to add this cross section here with this bar right here. And what this does is with this plate is if this shifts at all, this plate will actually press up against this part of the frame, which is where your shoulders usually go during hack squat. So not only is it pressing the bottom of the sled here, but it's got this extender and it's pressing directly on the top of the sled. So it's actually a very even distribution across the entire sled when you're pressing the bottom with your legs. On top of that, it also makes it that much more rigid, that much more stiff, that much more secure, no matter how much weight is on there. The next obstacle I had to come up with, or I had to solve, was the fact that when I set this thing on there, it might shift left or right and it might not line up exactly. So I added these plates, 1/4-inch plates on the side. Again, like a mouth, it just hugs. It can only go on this one way and it can only go on straight. After that, I thought, well, what if I'm doing a leg press one day and I have my feet way up here at the top because I'm trying to hit my hamstrings, and I'm pressing kind of up in a sliding fashion, and there's a lot of weight, follows the path of least resistance, you know, yada yada, something happens, and this thing actually wants to slowly, during each rep, work its way up, off, and eventually comes unbit. Now that's incredibly unlikely because the tolerance is tight enough and this backing right here that it's very unlikely it could just slide straight up. If it shifted at all, it would bite down and it wouldn't slide. It would have to be slid directly up, and that's incredibly unlikely with pressure going this way. But because it's technically possible and you don't want to find out the wrong way or the hard way with a hospital bill that you didn't do something correctly, I went ahead and added this. This is just 2 holes drilled here and here. This will be cleaned up and made pretty. I'll probably add a magnet to it, but this basically acts as my dowel pins. This hole goes straight through this plate and straight in here. Then I can drop the pins in and it physically cannot come up off there. So these plates on either side prevent it from shifting back and forth. This plate on the front and the plate on the back means that it won't go back and forth this way. This extra support means that it can't shift, and these pins mean that it can't slide up off there. Basically, it's almost as if it's a permanent fixture that's not meant to come off. But if I do want to take it off, it's pretty easy. I'll show you that. Just like that. Put it back on. Just like that. Now, if we're around the bottom side here, we can see that again, very basic square frame. It's got one single cross member to support the middle. I actually took one of those big hinges and I cut it in half, and I used one half of the hinge over here with a shorter bolt and the other half over there with a short bolt, so that each corner is independently supported. So no matter how you distribute the weight, no matter how your body weight might shift or how you're getting on and off, it's never going to rock or teeter on a centering hinge. Instead, it's supported independently on each corner. Again, maximum strength, maximum rigidity. And then from here, I put these little ears on either side of the tube, and then I put the exact same type of ears on either side of this tube, and I put telescoping tube in between them. Now this actually screws in to lock it in place, or unscrews. I can actually pull the pin, it's spring activated, and as I lift up to release the pressure from it, I can pull the pin and actually raise this or lower it. Now I can raise or lower so I can change the angle of attack for either the leg press or the hack squat. Now I can just let the spring go, drops in place, I'll screw it back in, nice and tight. Now the thing is stiff and rigid as can be. It's got the 3 points of contact. I went ahead and just put a tab on the back of this pad, and I cut a notch out from the slide. So now I can just there we go, and it sits just like that. It doesn't center itself, but it stays generally where it's supposed to. It won't slide up and down, and of course my body weight against it will help push it down. Also, it flares out wide, so even if for some reason that tab failed, because the actual wood backing inside is wider than the opening here, it just can't go any higher at some point. So this actually might work fine the way it is, but I'll use it a few times and we'll see how it works.